Hey World Civilizations, this is Mr. Lassiter.
And Mr. Guilford.
And we're back by popular demand with another review time video for your test on Wednesday. The test that should have been approximately a week and a half ago.
Yeah, whatever.
And a day. But anyways, so we're going to get started and we're going to play Review Roulette once again. Because that was by far our most popular.
Or at least our shortest.
And the shortest. So down in the comments at the end when you get finished, vote for me. I was the winner last time. So would you like to take your position?
Yes.
Okay. Losers outs. All right. Here we go. Mr. Guilford.
All right, we'll start with an easy one for you. What was the Enlightenment?
The Enlightenment, a dominant cultural movement that we've studied in the late 1600s and 1700s, occasionally referred to as the Age of Reason. Leading thinkers believed that science and reason could be used to solve any problems, not just scientific problems anymore. And they started questioning traditional beliefs, and especially traditional rulers. All right, Mr. Guilford, what were the three causes of the Enlightenment?
There were lots of causes, but three main causes are, there were, first of all, the breakthroughs of the scientific revolution. These big breakthroughs in physics made people think, hey, we could use science and reason to come up with breakthroughs in other areas, like government and economics, and make the world better that way. Then there was also the problem that during the 1600s, the century that preceded the Enlightenment, there were lots of religious wars. And this made people question traditional religious beliefs and start thinking about new ways that they could approach the world and approach society. And last of all, there was increasing contact with non-European societies in Africa and in Asia, that basically showed them that there were different ways of doing things than they had traditionally been done in Europe. Okay, what were some common assumptions of Enlightenment thinkers?
Oh, geez. Enlightenment thinkers believed that humans were naturally good for the most part. They believed that social problems were the cause of kind of bad behavior in humans, that there were inherent social issues that could be corrected with rational thinking. And so if you could think through the problems that existed in society, you could actually create some type of reform to fix those problems and create a more perfect society. And then they also assumed that, or believed that they needed to abandon old ideas, kind of the old religious ideas that had kept them doing things the way they had always been done. All right, section 2. I'm going to tell you, name a person, and you tell me major Enlightenment ideas that are associated with them.
Right on.
Hobbes.
Okay, so Hobbes is funny because he might be viewed more as like a thinker that came right before the Enlightenment, because he has a lot of ideas that go against the main ideas of the Enlightenment. Hobbes's basic idea is that people are actually evil and that we need to have a strong government to punish people for doing evil things. That way people don't do those evil things. And so he takes this idea to the conclusion that in order to have a stable society, we have to have a strong, absolutist ruler. And so these are ideas that are not really Enlightenment ideas, but a lot of Enlightenment thinkers react against Hobbes and come up with kind of opposite ideas.
All right.
Locke.
All right, John Locke. He actually kind of basically disagrees with everything Hobbes says. He believes in natural rights, those rights of life, liberty, and property, the same ones that we see in the Declaration of Independence and the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Declaration of Sentiments and all these other great documents. He also believed in the idea of consent of the governed. So the people who live under a government somehow give the government legitimacy. And if the government infringes on your natural rights, then you have the right to throw off that government and kick them out of America. Here's looking at you, Britain. All right. I'm going to give you two, Montesquieu and Rousseau. Go.
All right. Let's do Montesquieu first. So Montesquieu, if any of you guys have ever heard the phrase power corrupts, Montesquieu believed this, and he actually literally says that in some of his books. Power corrupts. But so how do we keep power from becoming super corrupt? What Montesquieu says is that the government should be divided into several different, wings, branches. Yes, so he says that government should be divided up into several different branches, like the executive branch and legislative branch, and that these different branches of government should kind of fight against each other. That way, no branch has absolute power, and it will prevent the government from becoming corrupt because they will have to compete and they can check each other's power. So that's Montesquieu's idea. It can be summarized with the phrase separation of powers because the power in the government is separated into different branches. Rousseau has tons of ideas. He's a super complicated thinker, but the main idea that you should have for Rousseau is that he stresses the idea of the social contract. And this is that basically to live in society, people give up some of their freedoms in order that we can live in a safe and protected environment. So basically, like, if I wanted to keep all of my freedom, that would mean that I would be free to throw rocks at people and steal stuff. But instead, I give up some of my freedom in order to be sure that I can live in a safe society where my natural rights will be protected. Right on.
All right.
All right, two right back at you. You've got Wollstonecraft and Beccaria.
All right, so Mary Wollstonecraft, the mother of Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, by the way. That's, yeah, it's, small world. She was an Enlightenment thinker who wanted to apply Enlightenment ideas not only to men, of course, but also to women. So she was one of the kind of early feminist thinkers, and so her ideas are going to heavily influence women's Enlightenment thinking. Beccaria was an Enlightenment thinker who really challenged the ideas of the harsh punishments that Europeans were known for at the time. He was against the use of the death penalty, against the use of torture, and so he's going to lead to kind of a rethinking of ideas about how to punish people. In France, we kind of see this after the Reign of Terror later on, when eventually, after killing thousands of their own people, they decide that capital punishment's not ideal.
Better late than never.
Yeah. Yeah, a little, like 5 years too late there. According to the Enlightenment, what were some natural rights that all men possess?
Natural rights. So the big three, the ones that you're going to hear over and over again because it's in Locke and then later in the Declaration of Independence because Jefferson basically just plagiarizes John Locke, is life, liberty, and property. Of course, property and happiness kind of being the same thing to many bourgeois Enlightenment thinkers. But on top of that, you should also have the freedom to feel secure within the society where you live. Because that's, remember, the main reason you join society in the first place is to have this security from violation of your rights. Life, liberty, and property. According to Enlightenment thinkers, what was, quote-unquote, the social contract? I guess we already explained that one a little bit.
Yeah, we'll skip that one. Go back a couple minutes and listen to Mr. Guilford tell you about Rousseau, and you'll hear about that one.
Okay, how does the social contract idea that we just mentioned lead to the idea of revolution?
Yeah, so in most of our cases that we've seen, the rebellious individuals, whether they were American colonists or slaves in Haiti or Creoles in Latin America, they blamed government for infringing upon their rights. Or if you remember the bourgeoisie in France, not really giving you a say in anything in their absolutist government that benefited the upper class, the aristocracy. So because government was infringing on their rights or not granting them equal rights or not protecting their rights, they thought that, of course, they should change things. And boom, you get revolution if you're not happy with government. All right. Hey, we're past American Revolution now. The Declaration of Independence. Get ready.
All right.
What events and problems led to the American Revolution?
Okay, so the basic framework that a lot of American leaders were thinking under was this idea of the social contract, and the idea that if the British don't protect American rights, then the Americans have the right to rebel. And this is basically what happens. The colonists want to do things their own way. They want to not have British taxation. But the British do want to tax the colonies because the whole point of having colonies is to make the home country richer. So the colonists get upset because they believe their natural rights are not being protected by the British. On top of this, the British start killing Americans, for example, in the Boston Massacre. And so this sort of ignoring of American rights and not allowing the Americans to represent themselves in some kind of way leads Americans to eventually reject the British presence in North America.
All right, shoot.
Oh, hang on. All right, what were the major accomplishments of the American Revolution?
Well, the American Revolution produced the first free country of the Western Hemisphere, not under colonial rule. I guess since Columbus had arrived, really.
Yeah.
It created America, so that was pretty important. Also, some of the other big accomplishments are basically taking these Enlightenment ideas that we've been talking about and creating kind of a great experiment, which was the United States. From the Declaration of Independence, declaring the United States a free country, to the writing of the Constitution, which established separation of powers and checks and balances, to the Bill of Rights, which guaranteed our natural rights and kept the government from infringing upon them. All of these things are major accomplishments that this revolution ultimately achieves by creating a new country. Also, it inspires more revolutions, which isn't always a bad thing. All right, big picture here. How did the ideas? Oh, we kind of answered.
Yeah, I think you just got that one.
Okay, yeah. Sorry for stepping on your feet there.
That's cool.
What other revolutions occurred as a result of the Enlightenment thought and new colonial identities?
Yeah. So it's important to realize that there are lots of revolutions that occur. We, being Americans, tend to learn about the American Revolution a lot, but there are revolutionary movements basically all throughout the Americas, but also back in France. So in America, we've got the Haitian Revolution, and then basically revolutions all through Latin America. And all of these revolutions, the leaders are thinking along the same Enlightenment lines that Thomas Jefferson was thinking along when he says, you're not protecting our rights, so therefore we can cast you off and have our own independent government. And if you look at the reasons that these leaders give, like for example in our readings from Simón Bolívar, you'll see that they're using Enlightenment ideas of liberty and equality and natural rights to justify violent revolution. And of course, in the French Revolution, you're going to see a lot of Enlightenment ideas as well. But one thing that makes the American Revolution unique is they justify themselves using Enlightenment ideas and then actually install a government that functions along the ideas, or along the course of the ideas of the Enlightenment thinkers. Whereas the French Revolution kind of quickly goes downhill to like chopping people's heads off for no good reason, and the Latin American revolutions end frequently with dictatorships. The American Revolution ends in a stable republic with checks and balances that would probably make all the Enlightenment thinkers really happy.
That was beautiful. Very well done.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Vote for me. All right, so where did the Enlightenment start and where had it spread by 1800?
Oh gosh, well the Enlightenment really starts in England, France, and the Netherlands, kind of that western parts of Europe, but it spreads way beyond that, of course, to the Americas, which we were talking about with these revolutions, and to places like Germany, Scotland, and Eastern European places. Some leaders in Eastern Europe embraced certain Enlightenment ideas, some embraced many of them. They certainly did not want to give up the idea of absolutism when they embraced some of the ideas, though. All right, who were the traditional elites of European society, and where did their power come from?
These guys are variously known as the aristocrats or the nobles, or maybe the feudal elite. But so these guys basically can trace their status as elites all the way back to the Middle Ages. Some of them literally can trace their family line from the 1700s back to like the year 800. So ancient families that have owned land. The source of their economic power is because they own huge tracts of land on which they allow poor peasants to work. And so they are important because they control basically the agriculture of this society.
All right, I'm going to ask a follow-up.
Okay.
So who were the new elites? Where did their power come from? And why did they tend to support Enlightenment ideas?
Okay, so opposing the aristocrats. By the 1700s, there were the aristocrats who were the rich basically farmland owning people. Opposing these guys were the new elites, and these guys were called the bourgeoisie, that being the root of our modern term bougie. So these guys got their wealth and power from all of the new businesses that had grown up after the beginning of world trade that happened because of the voyages of exploration. So because of world trade, big cities were growing in Europe, and in these cities you could make your money without having to farm. So you could basically ignore the aristocrats, and you could make your money by being a merchant, buying and selling and trading, or you could be a businessman, you could start up a workshop, or you could attain an education, maybe a scientific education, and become a doctor or an architect or a lawyer. And in this way you could become wealthy even if you weren't from an ancient noble family. And so by the late 1700s, the bourgeoisie and the aristocrats had grown up as conflicting elites, and they were kind of competing for power in France and other places as well. And so the reason that the bourgeoisie liked the Enlightenment ideas was that the Enlightenment ideas kind of leveled the playing field between the aristocrats and the Enlightenment. So for example, the aristocrats had lots of old privileges, like for example, they didn't have to pay taxes because they were subject to different laws than the bourgeoisie. So when the bourgeoisie said they wanted legal equality for all men, what they really meant is they wanted to get rid of the aristocrats' privileges. That way, everybody would be equal, and the bourgeoisie would be better able to compete against the aristocrats. Whew.
All right.
Okay, so why did some absolutist nations, for example, like Russia or Austria, begin to introduce Enlightenment reforms by 1750?
Oh gosh, that's such a good question.
I'm glad you like it.
Such a good question. Well, we see that increasing competition, military competition, but also economic competition between these lands forces even the most conservative governments to reform in order to help their economy. So in Russia, we see them wanting to become more Western to help their economy. And if they're going to become more Western, you have to kind of align yourself with what's going on in Western Europe. And a lot of that had to do with the Enlightenment. And so really it was kind of a desire to join in with what was going on with the rest of Europe, Western Europe that was becoming more and more economically powerful in the world. All right, go to part 2, and then we'll finish.